Tom Tobin. I'm with the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the distance teaching and learning team here. I and my coworkers are here to present this episode of DTL Talks, a lightning talk series that we offer. And we're happy to have two members of our advisory board here today. Darcy Hardy is the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs for North America at Blackboard, and she is going to be our host. And Newton Miller is the lead faculty member in the Department of Education and Liberal Arts at the University of Arizona Global Campus. And he's going to be talking to us about how he switches from at-risk students to at-potential students. So how we're going to use our time today, we have about half an hour. Darcy and Newton have a couple of questions that they'd like to ask one another and start the conversation. And then about halfway through, we're going to open it up for chat-based questions and ideas from all of you. Please post your ideas in the chat, use it as a side conversation. So if ideas spark for you or those kinds of things, use that chat feature. So we'll have some interaction together as well. Without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Darcy Hardy. Thank you, Darcy.
Great. And thank you, Tom, for the opportunity to interview this rock star, Newt Miller. And, this is so exciting because those of us on the advisory board, many of us have been involved in this conference for so many years. And I love this new idea of bringing some of our keynotes back to talk with folks that are on the line today. Yeah. So I have become a fan of Dr. Newt. I have been watching now the Medicine for a Minute for the Mind, or a Minute of Medicine for the Mind. Those little short clips are about all I can fit in a day right now. But they're so good. And, we don't have a whole lot of time because there's a million things we could talk about. But Newt, I really would like for you to talk a little bit about yourself, your general philosophy, why you're passionate about what you do. So let's just start with you talking about yourself and why you do what you do and where your passions are.
Well, I never really wanted to be an educator. I kind of wanted to be an engineer, and I don't even know where that kind of came from. I think someone kind of told me one day, you should be an engineer, you're good at math. And so I stumbled upon education. I was an engineer, and I needed a job. I was changing locations, needed a job, and they had a job in Philadelphia School District for people who were good in math and science to teach math and science. They were going to teach us this method called the Socratic method. It was called Project Seed. And I got in there and got in front of those students, man, and I just fell in love. I was like, this is it. This is what you're supposed to do in life. I wasn't thinking about salary at the time, but nevertheless, that's how I kind of got into education. And then over the years, I really tried to leave a few times and always found my way back. And I think really, in short, the short answer and my passion is really to kind of get folks to look past that traditional education arena and those systems that we have that we call schools. It kind of limit outputs. And that really comes from me growing up, inner city, urban, low income. So you saw a lot of ingenuity in our communities, just from the survival mindset. You saw a lot of ingenuity, a lot of smarts that didn't necessarily transition into what was called smart or intelligent based on our traditional school systems. But I want people to look past that and look to what I call the spirit of education. Because the spirit of education permeates through everything in our lives. So my passion is to get people to look past that traditional system into what education itself means, holistically, you as an individual, because I believe that education is the only institution in itself. The spirit of education is the only institution that brings opportunity 100% of the time, if you embrace her. So that's really my passion. That's where I am. I just want people to get educated.
And how long have you been an educator now, officially?
Wow.
I think you've been an educator your whole life, but didn't realize it, even when you were an engineer. But how long have you been formally in the role?
I think it was 1994 when I stepped in that first classroom. But I mean, I left a few times, but ended up back in education. But 1994 was the first classroom in at Strawberry Mansion Middle School in North Philadelphia is where I was, I was going to sing the song, born and raised, the Fresh Prince. But that's kind of where it started. So that's kind of my passion. But to kind of tie that into my work, I think that we're doing now with the last keynote when we were at DTL last year, which was an honor, by the way, to even be asked. And who wants to hear what I have to say? Is kind of I was thinking. But we talked about the 3 T's: thinking, teaching, and technology in that order. And it all stemmed from some research I did. So I did some research where I just wanted to know what could I do to help men of color be more successful in this online education environment. Because I worked at the time, our university was private and for profit. We're no longer, we're still private, I guess. I don't know. University of Arizona, is that private? I don't know. But anyway, so our status has changed. But at that time, we had a large population of potential students. And I wanted to make sure that at least those men of color, so I'm talking about all men of color, were successful, because I was seeing that they weren't, from the data we were capturing. So what I decided to do was look at the successful men of color, those that had a 3.0 or above, 125% graduation rate. So what are they doing? So not from the standpoint of what can we do, more like what are they doing? So tell me what you're doing to be successful. And I want to now think about that, and how can I build a system to help others do what you're doing so they could be successful too. So we did that research. About 1,300 men of color participated, and we found, I think it was 8 or 10 like common techniques, right? But it was so easy that I knew it was wrong. I was like, something's wrong here. This is too easy. So I was like, okay, I took more of a quantitative approach. Let me step back and let's mix some qualitative in here. So we went back to IRB. We kind of changed the research method, and we captured some qualitative data, and something jumped off the table, man. I mean, it was just fascinating. It totally has changed how I see and do education, from now on. And it basically 97.8%. Now, I'll never forget that number. 97.8% of all of those original 1,300 men of color all had the same 3 pillars of mind. They were all thinking the same way, right? So why that was so revelational is because up to now, I was taught, I'm the teacher. They're going to feed off of me. And the techniques and methods I use, that's going to drive their success. Kind of what works. Like I know what works. I have it in my hand. It's all about me. And that data showed me that it really had, that my techniques and methods were not the major drivers. It was really their thinking. And because I was looking at it from the student standpoint, it was their ability to connect techniques and methods to their own thinking. So their why mattered. So that kind of really like changed the whole game for me. And I mean, their 3 pillars were basically they didn't have a poor experience, so they didn't have a need to have a poor experience. So with potential populations, you start out with a poor experience, that's what's always going to be expected. These guys didn't have that, so they didn't expect it. So they were able to receive and give more to their whole experience. The second one was that, man, they had like their laser focus on their goals, dreams, and aspirations was unmovable. I mean, that sounds like everyone does that, but the deal was that, when life changes, we tend to kind of shift our goals a little bit to match our life. They didn't. Like they figured out how can they still realign their lives to match that original goal. So they had a laser focus on that, and then all of their obligations they saw as motivators and not burdens. So kind of what that did for me overall, those 3 pillars, it let me know that we got to flip upside down the triangle of the whole technology, the whole thinking, teaching, technology paradigm that we have. And really thinking was the most the most impactful. So we needed to learn how our students are thinking. We need to learn how to think like them. And we needed to learn how to map whatever we're doing in the class to how our students were thinking and not what we thought was acceptable thinking, and that's powerful for at potential populations because the mindsets are different. Your mindsets are based on your experiences. What happened? What did you see? What affected you growing up? So not that we'll ever totally understand those things about people, but I can understand your outcomes. I can understand your trends, your thought patterns. And because that's your thought pattern, I can put this tool in place. I like to call them accommodations. I know accommodations in that I should be saying interventions, but I don't like to call them interventions because intervention means you're waiting till something happens and then you intervene. Well, I don't want anything to happen. So I'm going to give you an accommodation like the hotel does. When I get there, I buy the package with accommodations. So when they walk into my class, you have the supreme package with all the accommodations waiting for you. Whether you use them or not, it's up to you. So that's kind of, I feel like I'm rambling a little, but that was kind of the work, if you will. And that led to me seeing, stop calling these students at risk. So they're at risk versus at potential. The obvious thing is that you're looking at it either from an asset or a deficit, vocabulary standpoint. And of course you want to be, asset driven and not deficit driven. But it did something else as well. It wasn't just the verbiage, but it was also what I call the activation, the mode of activation. So when you looked at that verbiage, asset or deficit, what it did for the student to hear themselves called at potential instead of at risk meant there's hope for me. Potential is wide open. At risk is so closed. Like, this is what I am. It's a label. It's a label that puts me in a box. At potential is a gateway, a doorway to another room. So it does that for the student. But here's what it does for the educator. So we got to remember that the power of life and death is in our tongue. So we can start to say a thing and we start to believe a thing and think a thing and start to manifest that thing in our life, So for the educator to say at potential and to get that, in circulation in their vocabulary, now they were then checking their own implicit bias. They were then checking their own, set of expectations. They were now changing how they thought about their students and the possibilities in those students' lives. It was the difference between, I call it the acorn or the peach seed. So if I had in my hand, in this hand, an acorn and in this hand, a peach seed, and I came to you and I said, so what do you see in my hand? You're probably going to say an acorn and a peach seed. And I'm going to say, no, I see a peach tree with hundreds of peaches, for years and years. And I see a gigantic oak tree, 75 feet tall, with branches that spread for 20 yards and a habitat for many other things. It's just the difference between what am I seeing right now? And if I see it differently, I'm going to treat it differently. And that educator has the responsibilities to build that environment so the acorn can become the peach tree. So I think that at potential thing is way deeper and more powerful than just a word,
Okay.
The other piece, and I'll shut up about at potential, but is the second half of the verbiage is this activation. So if you look at that word potential, there's two types of energy. Here's the physics guy from me, the engineer, right? So there's two types of energy. There's potential energy, well, for our purposes, potential energy and kinetic energy. So when you talk about potential energy, that means something can be released. If there's a possibility that this thing can, based on its mass and gravity and size, it has the potential to do this much work or produce this much energy. Kinetic means once I get that thing moving, I can measure how much work and energy it's doing. So that's a real thing, kinetic versus potential. So when I say an at potential student, when I tell a student, you're at potential, that means you have the possibility to do some great things. Those possibilities lie in you, right? So my job as the educator is to do something to break the inertia so that you can convert that potential into kinetic. So my job as the educator is to create that environment, push that critical thinking, problem solving, that desire, so that student can understand, like I said, the spirit of education that's inside them, so they can become productive and contributing members of society. So that's my passion, that's my work, and that's how I tied into DTL. Long answer.
No, but so, and this is why I'm a fan, because that philosophy and the way you look at things, even the terms that you twist and turn around, it just makes you think more about education and about educating students and their perspective as well as your perspective. I know we have quite a few people on, and we want to open it up for Q&A for people to ask questions, and let's see if we get something. If there's something that we can start with, because otherwise I have one. Who has a question? Can you please share what an accommodation would be?
So, oh, wow. So I could talk an hour and a half on that just alone. So, we found accommodations that we transformed into what I call implications, things that the university can do in not just academics, but in advising and support services. So I'll stick to just kind of the academics ones today, just to tell you. So with my team, the Ed Studies teams that I lead, all my faculty, full-time and associate faculty or adjunct, after some painstaking, you see me emphasize painstaking conversations. I had to build PLCs, and we had to go back and forth professionally and personally, if you will, and talk about how we felt about accommodations, and putting these tools in place for students. So a lot of things came out in those conversations. A lot of things, not just about the education, but about the person themselves. So there are 5 techniques and methods that we like to use, or accommodations that we've used across the board. And I've seen a 14% decrease in failure rates and a 16% increase in retention in our courses, in our programs over the past 5 years since we've been doing this. And so we're hovering around 97% retention and about 3% failure rates for our classes. I think that's pretty good. So those 5 are relaxed deadlines. So again, there's usually a dotted line, a straight line between on time and late. So we perforated that line. We put holes in that line. And what we do on an as-need basis for students, we go ahead and accept those assignments, and we do not penalize for them. So everyone does it differently. For me, I do it to the last day of class, because that's just me. I'm overboard like that. But we have some folks that say, okay, you have to contact me first. I give you 3 days extra. After the 3 days, then you have 2 points a day or something like that. We have others that give them a week. We have others that talk to the students and build something. Whatever the case may be, we relax those deadlines. And what that does for that potential student, it's an amazing thing. Doesn't mean that they're going to wait till the end to turn it in. What it means is they know that up front, you've just pulled the anxiety off the table for many of our potential students. And the potential student could be someone who is sound academically, but hasn't been in school for 20 years, so they're a little nervous, or they have, 5 kids and 2 jobs, and a husband, because, us husbands are high maintenance, so, they have all kinds of stuff going on in their lives, and they just need the time to do quality work. They're getting up at 2 in the morning to do their stuff. Whatever the case may be, we perforate those lines so that those relaxed deadlines are in play. It removes the anxiety, and it gets students activated, to want to do the work or think they can. Again, it goes to that thinking piece. Another one that I suggest you use, won't cost you anything. You can start it today, is exemplar examples. Exemplar examples, an old K-12 method. So whenever there's a test, a paper or a project, you give the student an example of what an A paper or project looks like. Not a template that tells them what to do in there. No, you give them an actual paper, student work from another student that passed, they got an A, take the student name off and ask the student for permission first, and you go ahead and post that and you let your students see it. Now, I get these two questions whenever I tell people, well, won't they just copy and paste and cheat? Well, at this university, I've been here over 8 years. I've taught over 200 courses, and I can think of 3 people who copy and pasted either part or that whole paper and sent it to me. And when I called them with my direct way of calling them,
you wouldn't know?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. When I called them with my direct way, I was like, yo, man, I'll put the paper there. Don't you think I know it is? What's up? Why'd you do that? Well, Mr. Miller, I ran out of time. And I figured it was better putting something than nothing. Wasn't sure if you were going to know. So I heard that whole survival mindset jump in, and I understood that. So I was like, well, I do know, and I do see, you have this amount of time to get it into me, or we're done. And don't you ever do that again, because you won't run up against me next time. You'll run against the other guy who will send you to I-roads right away. So I had that question. So cheating doesn't happen. And the other question is does it decrease the creativity? Well, the exact opposite happens. Remember, you're dealing with an at-potential population that for general purposes is not necessarily education etiquette trained, So when they see what you want, then that whole grit, that whole resiliency and level of creativity jumps in play. And they use that paper as a template, and they add on their stuff. And what I have to do every year is I have to change those exemplars, because the papers and the projects keep getting better. So those are 2 you can use. If you contact me, I think my email and stuff is on the flyer, or I'll put it in the chat. I will send you some more, or even talk with you in depth about that. But I don't want to. We'll let somebody else ask a question.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more quick question. And I don't see one in the chat unless someone wants to put one in there. I may have one quick one.
There's one from Sarah Corpy asking about the menu of choices concept. Rather than focusing on accommodations for one learner, offering a menu of choices to all, helping to create a more inclusive environment. So what techniques have you found to be useful when talking with your colleagues about the shift in accommodation approaches?
Sorry, I missed that one.
I know. I was trying to catch on. It was a long question. So I couldn't agree more. My question is about your menu of choices, concepts, focusing on companies. Okay, so in essence, I think it's Tom, do you think they're just asking me how did my colleagues feel about this approach?
Your colleagues, when you say accommodation, they might be thinking making one change for one person. So how do you talk to them about this shift in thinking?
Right. So kind of just how I said it when I was talking a little earlier, I explained to them that the correct term would be interventions. It could be a RTI model, or we could just say we're scaffolding instruction for students. I choose the word accommodations, and we talk in depth about this because I believe we, as especially online educators, we have the benefit of doing a course over and over again, and being able to capture real data about student trends, and being able to do some what type of research is it? Action research to kind of see what works and doesn't work. So we're at a benefit, I believe, an advantage as online educators. So I think we should be using that. Our ethics tell us we should be using that information to put things in place for students before they get there so they can be successful. So that's why I use the accommodations. Here's your hotel plan. You get the supreme plan in Miller's class, and for the low price of $99.50, you get and I give them the checklist of stuff I do. You're going to get relaxed deadlines. You're going to get exemplar examples. You're going to get course videos. You're going to get access to me. You're going to get, and I give them the list of the things that you're going to get. Now, whether they use them or not is up to them. I don't care. They're there. They paid the low price of $99.50. So that's kind of how I explain it to the instructors. And that's for the ones that are not familiar with UDL, because it's really kind of what it is in its rawest form. You know, it's UDL, and that's kind of how we do it. So we do have some conversation to go back and forth, because many think that the better instructor is the one that makes it more difficult for the student. And I totally do not believe that at all. I think that is like the opposite. I mean, it's like, you know, I have 5 children, and I wanted to lay things in place for their lives so that they could miss some of the roadblocks and you know, landmines that I encountered along the way, so that they can take off from where I started. And I believe teachers are the same. So it would be insane for me to say, yeah, well, I just want I want my children to have the school of hard knocks like I had, you know? I mean, that just would be insane. You would look at me crazy. But yet, if in some of us as educators, we kind of think that way. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but that is about it. I explain what I mean, and let them talk.
And I think, Tom, you know, Newt, I think we could talk for hours, and I think everyone probably feels the same way. I wish we had more time, but I know we're wrapping up. So, Tom, I'm going to turn it back to you, and thank you for sharing things with us, Newt. It's great.
Absolutely. And thank you, Newton Miller, for some insightful ideas and conversation today. Thank you, Darcy Hardy, for being our host. And I see that there's a couple other questions in the chat. Newton put his email address there, and I know that Newton is willing to have that conversation afterwards.
I really wanted, the person, that last one is saying about the professor who thinks he's lowering standards. Please contact me on my email. I really want to talk to you. That is an excellent question.
Awesome. And thank you, everybody, to our University of Wisconsin-Madison team behind the scenes. They've been letting you in and monitoring the chat, so we're grateful for all of their work. And I also want to end with a quick commercial. And on your screen now is our annual Distance Teaching and Learning Conference. It's 100% online. It's going to be August 2nd through the 5th. And our theme is What's Next? So after the pandemic, what does the future of education look like? Our registration will open on April the 14th. We have a new low price to let everybody be able to afford it. And we're really grateful to have Maha Bali from the American University in Cairo, and Jeremy Knox and Sean Bain from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland as our keynote speakers. And we also would encourage you folks, if you have a minute and you want some professional development training, now on your screen is our go.wisc.edu/DTL website. This is where we offer all of our individual 3-week courses, badge programs, micro-credentials, and certification in distance education design, instruction, and administration. So we are your teaching and learning center and your professional development center, sort of inside out. We work with everybody worldwide. So thank you, everybody, again for coming to this edition of the Distance Teaching and Learning DT&L Talk, Lightning Talks. Thank you, Newton. Thank you, Darcy. We'll see you soon. Take care, everybody. Our Zoom tradition is usually that you turn on your video if you're comfortable and wave goodbye. So we'll say goodbye for now, and thanks for coming today. Take care, everybody.